give a huge Beaver State Comic Con welcome to John Morton.
Where is he? The interesting thing about the AT-ATs is at the time they were not called AT-ATs or AT-ATs. They were Imperial Snowwalkers. So just as Star Wars trivia, a lot of those names that you associate with the vehicles and what have you came several years later with the role-playing games from West End. So that's my trivia for the moment, but hit me, Felipe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, fun fact, the real name of AT-ATs are operating cranes at Oakland Harbor.
There you go.
If you guys don't know that, the Oakland Harbor in the San Francisco Bay Area, Lucas said this in an interview. He was driving off the bridge one day and saw the cranes, and he was like, huh, I want to make those into something in the next movie. And if you drive by Oakland Harbor, they're still there. I mean, they still use them, and they look like AT-ATs.
Well, that might also have inspired the cranes that were in The Mandalorian, you know, in the calamari sequences.
Right.
If you looked at those in the container ports there, that was very reminiscent.
Absolutely was.
Probably is more accurate representation of what you're talking about.
Right.
In the Bay.
And especially like if you know that Easter egg. Right,
yeah.
Then it's kind of like, oh yeah, this like, and I'm sure Favreau and Filoni knew that, and they're like, we're gonna make a reference to that. If you know, you know. If you don't, that's just a cool thing to see.
I believe it.
Yeah,
yep.
And they seem like those kind of guys. So before we get into your origin story, everything about John Morton, what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna ask you a question that we ask everybody that it's on our show. We have a segment called "Growing Up Geeky."
Growing up what?
Geeky.
Geeky. Oh yeah.
What did
that
you?
Fits.
Right. For all of us. What did you geek out on when you were a kid?
Superman.
Yes.
Yeah. I love Superman, the original, you know, on TV.
Right.
And that's what got me into Kellogg's Corn Flakes and, you know, Rice Krispies. I figured that out, that, you know, the commercials, you know, hooked me for life.
We're talking George Reeve in the cereals,
yeah. That was Kellogg's was the sponsor,
right?
And if we're really going to go back to geekness and childhood, does anybody know who Howdy Doody was?
Raise your hand if you know Howdy Doody.
I was really into Howdy Doody when I was about 4, and
I think every kid back then was into Howdy Doody back then.
Could be. Some, you know, later on got into the Mickey Mouse Club, but. My father, who I adored, he was my hero. He was a Navy guy. He brushed his teeth with Ipana toothpaste, which, you know, had this fancy-dancy toothpaste tube. And that's what I did. I did everything my dad did, except after I saw Howdy Doody, and Howdy Doody was big on Colgate. Do you know that I switched from Ipana to Colgate, and I used Colgate forever, you know, all through my life until I discovered Tom's. And so I brush with Tom's. They pay me vast sums of money to educate people at conventions. So I urge you to try Tom's.
There you go. Switch your toothpaste, guys.
I also have a bridge to sell if you'd like that.
Is it in San Francisco?
No.
It's a callback.
It's across South River in Maryland.
There you go. So did you always want to get into acting? Was that something that came along later in life? Or was it Howdy Doody that made you want to be an actor? I want to be that puppet.
No, Clarabelle. No, I wanted to be a musician. I was very taken with Bob Dylan, and I was in the Greenwich Village scene when I was a teenager, and I played in a jug band with Loudon Wainwright, who's the father of Rufus.
Yeah.
And that was my intent. But my mother was English. She was a war bride, and so when I got out of the Navy, I went over to London to start my career as a folk singer. And I played the circuit, did a lot of, you know, stand-up work as a singer-songwriter. And I was discovered by a London director who said, you know, hey, you know, you're really good. You got a good stage quality. And I said, well, thanks. And he said, have you ever acted? Look, if anybody asks you, have you ever acted, and excuse me, that's my cue. Let me turn that off. me turn it off. There we go. If anybody asks you if you've ever acted, there's only one answer. And do you know what the answer is? Yes. Because, an offer's coming. So I had acted, yeah, and I said yes. And he said, what have you been in? And I gave him my high school and college credits. Didn't tell him they were for high school or college. He said, yeah, that's good. Well, I need an American who can play the guitar, who has long hair, which I did in those days, and to play in this musical I've written. And would you be interested in doing that? And I said, heck yeah. So in a year's time, he called me up, and I took five weeks off of where I was working, which, believe it or not, was on the Stage Electrics crew for the Rocky Horror Stage Show. And they let me go. They said, we don't want to get in the way. Well, that show, believe it or not, transferred directly into the West End, which is like London's Broadway.
Right, that's massive.
I mean, it was so unusual. And
it's also Rocky Horror. Rocky Horror went on to become a massive phenomenon.
But I was stage tech on that, which was great. I mean, when I wasn't acting, I was making a living as an electrician and sound board operator. Anyway, so I picked up an agent. She was a darn good one. She said, you're not really a stage actor, are you? And I said, no. And she said, but I think you do well in film. And so that's where the career took me, away from music into doing film acting. I did do a number of stage credits in London and New York. But as a film actor, that's why I'm here, because I was in Empire Strikes Back. That's where the career went.
Right. Right. Empire, that was 1980.
We did the scenes that I was involved in April, May 79.
79,
I guess
right.
The movie came out in 80 or 81, I can't remember.
It was 1980. Okay, yeah. Yeah, because Jedi was 83, so that's why I was like, okay, I know it's
okay.
Yeah.
That's the story.
Right. And I was going to say, before we fire up the Snowspeeder, right, we dive into Star Wars and everything like that, let's talk about some other projects. 1980 was a massive year for you.
Yeah, because Superman 2 came out.
Right.
And I was the astronaut on the moon, Nate.
Right. And then Flash Gordon.
And Flash Gordon.
Right.
I only did 2 days in Flash Gordon, whereas I did 4 weeks in Star Wars. And Superman 2, I did 2 iterations of that. I did the long shots in 77 with Richard Donner, and then because they got an illegal kind of snarl with Marlon Brando, who was hired on a single contract, and then he found out that he was being used in 2 films, and so he didn't like that, and he sued the company, and everything stopped. Donner was let go, and then another director came in, Richard Lester, and so the close-ups I did in 1979, when they destroyed the lunar module around me. That was quite spectacular. They collapsed the lunar module with the forks of a forklift truck that just came banging down on top of me. That was pretty scary. That was one take.
I would imagine, because how many of those sets do you have to redo,
really,
right?
Really. So
I get it. It's a Dick Donner film. At the time, it was a Dick Donner film, but it's like...
It was, but in that case, it was a Richard Lester film.
Yeah.
And he was a comedian director. He did the 2 Beatles films. Mm-hmm. And I did another film with him called Cuba, which was with Sean Connery. But Lester was, he was a funny guy. He liked to sight gags in making his films.
And like the dynamic between kind of both, right? So like, by the time that you were filming your scenes, you were working with Lester. Like, so did you get a chance to work with Dick Donner at all?
Yeah. Dick Donner in 77 did the long shots,
right?
The establishing shots on the moon.
Okay.
And that had its own charm. Honestly, it felt like the moon. They did a really good job of things. And the astronauts, the Soviet and American astronaut who were part of that team, they were off in the distance prospecting for moon rocks or whatever. They were kids. They were, little guys that were maybe 7 or 8. And the reason why is that from the perspective, they were, I'm imagining they were about, 15 yards from the camera. But they were coached to walk in a certain way, like they were adults in the gravityless moon. You would look and you see them, and they looked like they were, in your mind, you were saying, "Oh yeah, they're 6-foot astronauts." You didn't see them as kids; they're in uniform.
Right.
The perspective distortion was such, and that was all part of it with the way that set was constructed. It was fascinating, and honestly, you felt like you were on the moon.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool.
So being that you worked with both of those directors, what was the atmosphere like on set, both with Donner and then later with Lester, like the differences in the set atmosphere, but what were those atmospheres like?
Well, very professional. I don't,
Yeah.
Because it was only 1 or 2 days with each. I don't remember that kind of, granularity. I would say, as far as atmosphere and directing, working on Star Wars, which I did for 4 weeks, I worked with 3 people
Right.
who were directors. The director of record was Irvin Kershner,
Right.
and I worked with him when I did my Boba Fett scenes.
We're going to get into that because that's one of my
I worked with Richard. Not what I'm saying. I worked with Gary Kurtz, who was the executive producer, who was a Marine Corps combat cameraman in Vietnam, and he had a directing style which was quite realistic, whereas Kershner came from sort of a traditional working with actors theatrical background. So he was into emoting lines and things like that. And then I worked with George Lucas. And Lucas directed the scenes inside the cockpit for all of us, rebel pilots and rear seaters. And what Lucas was really concerned about, which is, really appropriate to talk about because, as probably most of you know, his first wife, Marcia, died a couple of days ago,
Right.
and there's a lot in the press about her. He had absorbed from her very much of a sensitivity as a director of an editor, and so when he was directing me, he was not really concerned about how I emoted lines. He was concerned about my eye lines because he was anticipating, all the action was going to be married with the model shots and what have you, with what was going on this blue matte screen, which was being lit. And so I was looking out in that direction. And so the camera was just rolling all the time. And George was saying, "Okay, John, give me the line. Okay, yeah, look exactly there. Okay, now, all right, come down a little bit, look to your left. Okay, there, yeah. Say the line again." I mean, it was just, there was no acting as such, in terms of emotion. It was really very mechanical. So you had 3 different approaches to acting from the 3 different directors that you worked with. The reason why George and Gary were directing the scenes is they were working with the second unit, because the first unit was doing something else with Irvin Kershner,
Right.
that required some sort of dramatic acting chops.
Right. Doing more of the dialogue scenes and everything like that.
Yeah, it could have been, he was doing something with Carrie and Harrison Ford, so the mechanics of getting these, routine shots for the Battle of Hoth, was given over to George and Gary.
Yeah. And just
So
to this day, like the cinematography in that and the way that they, like, even the acting itself was something different from what was happening in the late 70s and the 80s, because you still had a lot of over-the-top acting in the late 70s and the 80s.
Yeah.
And it seems so much more natural with the way that you guys deliver your lines and the way you guys were doing everything in those scenes. That plus George's whole goal was, I want to emulate World War II. And Kurtz's shots were so given. You know, he already knew how to do these sweeping shots, given him Vietnam and all that. Like, it all looks and feels exactly like what George was looking for in that.
Yeah, it was very collaborative
Yeah.
in every respect. It was I had 4 weeks of really watching how filmmaking, as an art, could really hang together. The thing about George and Gary, because they worked hand in glove together, they created a wonderful collaborative atmosphere. The morale was extremely high.
Yeah.
Really, right down to the tea lady. It was extraordinary. But George's style as a filmmaker, and I use that word very consciously, was to bring in people that had a skill of some, degree in whatever branch of the filmmaking, whether it was props or storyboards or whatever, and he would see something, just like you were saying about the cranes, that he felt he could use, and he would give those individuals the latitude to create, and then in the end would make the decision, did he want to use it or not, but he wouldn't get in their way as they're coming up with a prop, or a special effect. An amazing guy in terms of his brilliance in that respect. And then he married that, of course, with a wonderful vision of Star Wars,
Right.
which I remind people was very influenced by Joseph Campbell, and the idea of the world's mythos. He brought things. And to give you an idea of how impactful Lucas's vision has been, there are about 3 or 4 people who came to my table here today or yesterday that talked about going to see the film with their parents when they were 2
Yeah.
or 3, and they were blown away and remember it at that age. I mean, that's extraordinary. So there was something about the story of Star Wars and the way it was realized by George
Right.
and his collaborators that really, touched people in a profound way. I mean, I talked to my kids, and I remember taking my eldest daughter to see Aladdin, and she doesn't remember it, and she was about 2 or 3. So that didn't have an impact on her, but Star Wars had an impact on these 3 people at various times this weekend. And they tell me stories. Yeah, I saw this film and I remember it when I was 2. I mean, come on.
That
That's
has a lot of
profound.
impact. Yeah, I mean, that
That's
just means it
profound.
has a lot of impact. And it's absolutely amazing that it's like Star Wars has had such a lasting impression on the
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Kind of stepping back a little bit, so your audition process coming on to the film itself,
Yeah.
was it a standard audition process? I know Star Wars was very secretive, but did you know at any point during the audition process, oh, this is Star Wars?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, remember, I was in England, and Star Wars had an impact, but not quite as massive as it did here in the U.S. And also, in the 70s, in 1979, it wasn't the same. The actors, those of us, all of us, who came up for those parts, we weren't necessarily fans. The actors that I've met that have been in the later stuff, particularly Rebels, those that had voiced the characters. I'm thinking of Vanessa Marshall, but also in Andor and the other, Mandalorian. They came in as fans because they grew up with Star Wars,
Right.
and so the excitement about being up for Star Wars, if they knew, would have been very, very different than it was for me.
Right.
Which is why they had all those secret names for what the film was.
Blue Harvest and all the
Yeah,
things that they
yeah.
had for all that. Yeah.
In my case, you know, I knew I had friends who were in New Hope, as it was known. I knew Anthony Daniels, for example, socially before it struck big. You know, he'd done the film, but it hadn't been released yet. When you know, I was hanging with him at a cocktail party, and he said, "I have no idea what this is going to be." You know, okay. I had another friend, Anthony Forrest, who was out there with Anthony Daniels in Tunisia, and he's the guy that says these aren't the droids we're looking for.
Oh, okay.
And I worked with him on Bridge Too Far, and he told me about this, and it was kind of like, you know, it's a joke. It might be successful. So the first film, in England at least, people didn't really take seriously.
Yeah.
Of course, when it came out, that all changed.
That's funny because one of his lines, because now that I know that's him, one of his lines is my Wi-Fi name at home. It's this one's locked. Move on to the next.
Okay. So, you know, I knew that Star Wars was casting, and I and a lot of other people, American and Canadian actors, were really excited because, you know, it was work, right? There was a lot of work for us, but this was another job, and we wanted the work. So I was sent up by my agent to meet with a casting director named Irene Lamb, who was casting the under 5-line roles for Star Wars. And we were all on British Actors Equity contracts. And so I went in and met with Irene, and she said, yeah, okay, good. You know, you have a conversation with a casting director. Sometimes you will read lines if the director is there. For example, I was cast in Cuba with Richard Lester, who was working with Mary Selway. I didn't read lines, but Lester was kind of looking at me. And what they're looking at for those roles, small roles, is essentially getting a sense of you as a human being, and getting an idea of whether there's some kinetic quality that's going to translate to the character and film. And that's what it was with Irene. I'm pretty sure Irene Lamb, as far as Star Wars was concerned, looked at me and said, here's a guy who's, you know, credible as you know, a rebel pilot, you know. You know, there was a quality that I had when I was younger. There was military, and I did a lot of military roles because I'd been in the Navy. So 2 or 3 weeks later, my agent gets a call from them saying, yeah, we want John. And so I get the call. I show up on the set. I'd worked with all of the technicians before in 2, 3, 4 in one case, previous films, so they knew me. And I said, hey, Steve Lanning was the second assistant. I said, hey, Steve, it says here I'm going to do 2 days' work as a rebel pilot. You know, who am I? And I said, you're going to be Dak. Well, who's Dak? Well, he's Mark Hamill's co-pilot. And, hey, that's great. You know, everybody's going to remember, you know, Mark Hamill's co-pilot, right? And he said, yeah, but John, you know, it's not that good. The downside is you're already dead. They'd just come back from Norway where they'd filmed the scenes in Finse, and of course Dak crashes and gets stepped on by the AT-AT, and that was a Norwegian extra who took the hit. So that was unfortunate. I said, yeah, but still, you know. So that's, and then the other thing about that is that I was on a daily rate. I was expecting to do 2 days' work. Well, daily rates are very generous.
Yeah.
And I was paid a fortune for 2 days' work. But the trouble is they had issues with their schedules and what have you. I ended up going there on a daily rate and working for 4 weeks. Well, I made more money on those 4 weeks than I made the whole previous year. So I wasn't complaining.
Right.
And all of us were in that situation.
And I know, like, you know, the magic of editing does a lot. Did you actually get to work with Mark?
Oh,
in
yeah.
those scenes? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So what was it like working with Mark Hamill at that point?
Mark was great. I mean, obviously he's not the same as he was in those days, but he and I both shared a common growing up. His father was a Navy guy, and a very specific Navy guy. He was on destroyers, so he was a destroyer man, tin can sailor, which was my dad's thing. And so, as Navy juniors, a term of art, we had a very similar point of view. And so he wanted to have lunch with me every day. So I honestly had lunch with Mark every day for 4 weeks. Other guys would come in. Dave Prowse, Darth Vader, would come sit with us occasionally, and also Chris Malcolm, who I knew, who was what was his name? He was Zev, I think, Scottish Canadian actor. He was the original Brad in the Rocky Horror Show. Tall guy.
Yeah.
And then I had another friend named Eugene Lipinski, who was a pilot who was called away. He never had any scenes because he went off and did another show. But he'd sit with us. So, it was a really wonderful opportunity to get to know Hamill really well, and I liked him very much. He was a very genuine, what you see is what you get guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any funny behind the scenes moments between just anyone, not just between you and Mark, but between anybody in?
No, not really. I wish I could entertain you with that kind of story, but no. We just talking the stuff. I mean, Mark was very, very giving in terms. I remember him talking about the first time he went on the Johnny Carson show. And I can't remember the punchline, but he was very upset because Carson kind of ambushed him with a question. It had something to do with Carrie Fisher. And
at that point, people didn't know their characters were siblings. So
but he was a very collaborative guy. He shared a lot about the interactions between Gary Kurtz and George on their concern, I remember, which was very interesting to me. He said that they were very worried that Star Wars was beginning to go in the direction that was celebrating violence. And they didn't like that at all. And they were trying to figure out how the ways they couldn't glorify violence. And I remember Mark very specifically saying, they were saying this, this is not worthy of the Force. Oh, well, what's the Force all about? Well, I don't know. So, well, is it religious or what? And I remember Mark saying, Gary is maybe a Quaker or a Buddhist, and if you see pictures of him at that point in his career, he's got that sort of Quaker beard, with no mustache. And he was a very Zen kind of guy. I mean, he had that presence. And the other thing is the reason why he was a combat cameraman with the Marine Corps in Vietnam is he was a conscientious objector. Does anybody know what that is? He was against all war in any forms. He was a pacifist. And so he got drafted, and he got drafted into the Marine Corps, and he didn't carry a gun, he carried a camera. So he had a very strong commitment to a religious kind of space. And Mark was sharing with me that, he felt that he was making sure that the film was not glorifying violence, and George was kind of going along with that, and that the Force was real. And I say the Force is real because of the way they treated us. We were all paid very well. The morale amongst the technicians and all the people working on the set was extraordinary, unlike any other film that I worked with. And I did a lot of films. Usually technicians, and having been a theater technician myself, are kind of grumpy cats, who don't like actors sitting on their, tour boxes, and they'll complain, and they're union men, and it was men in those days. And so if they find something they want to take issue with, they'll let you know. Well, there was none of that that I saw on Star Wars, and I attribute that to George and to Gary and their concept of trying to get the Force into their movie and the way they treated people. It was so. There's an anecdote that's, not quite what you expected.
Right.
That's I'll stand by it.
So I'm gonna ask another question for you here, but while we're doing that, if anybody has any questions, we have a microphone here. If anybody wants to ask any questions, so just get ready. Please ask John any questions that you guys want to ask here. This is all for you guys. So while anybody's trying to figure out any questions that they want here, I'm gonna ask you this. The fandom has changed a lot since 1980. Conventions are a big thing. Cosplay is huge. Social media exists now. What's been the strangest or the coolest evolution you've witnessed as part of the Star Wars community?
You mean in terms of conventions and coming and participating in
Well,
these
just
with
like
the fans?
being able to interact with the fans.
Well, I think generally, not just Star Wars specific, starting in about 2013, I came to notice that, as I'm seeing around here, that more and more people were coming in costume, and so cosplay was taking on more of a presence. Whereas when I started the convention circuit in 1997 with the re-releases, I don't remember people coming in costume. They were street clothes. Now there's a lot more cosplay, which I think is a wonderful thing because it's where people get to come to a place and celebrate their creativity and expressiveness, and it's delightful, and it's fun, to be sitting back at my table and watching the passing parade of everybody in costume. And every now and then somebody comes by and they've got something exceptional, and I stop them and I said, let me take a picture and I'll post it on my Facebook as sort of an advertisement. And there's as far as the fan community with Star Wars specifically, I don't believe that the way the media and social media treat the fans' displeasure with Disney and so forth affects people on the street level. It may, but they don't. I don't see people coming to my table, complaining about this, that, and the other, as you would think if you read all the stories.
Yeah, the internet is a smaller community than people know it is, because the broader community usually doesn't.
Yeah. So I feel that the energy is remarkable. It's still very powerful in people and the fans and their lives. I personally am a member of all the three major, costume clubs: the Rebels, the 501st, and the Mercs.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the work they do for charities, and I support them all the time.
Yeah.
If they're out, having a blaster troop or whatever, I'm throwing in $20, $50 for Make-A-Wish or whatever it is. When I first started doing this, when promoters paid an appearance fee and then you had your autographs for separate fees, I always had a representative from whatever local children's charity that they wanted to support there to take the autograph money. And I did that from 97 to 2003, and then I had to bow out of the community for a number of years because my regular life got very busy. So that was originally how I handled it. And I've seen the 501st and whatever supporting Make-A-Wish, the Children's Cancer Society of California. It goes on and on. I think all of that is so well inspired. And again, example of why the Force is real as far as I'm concerned.
That's amazing. A question here?
John, how are you doing? Gonna take down the Empire with you. So
You
yeah.
are.
So now you mentioned you had Mark Hamill and the other Anthony Daniels, but what about some of the other supporting characters in the trilogy? One comes to my mind is Dennis Lawson, who played Wedge Antilles. You ever get a chance to work with him?
Well, not work with him on the convention circuit. Dennis was, in 1979, a very well-established stage actor on the kind of Shakespeare circuit. Very accomplished. However, he began as one of the company of the London production of Hair. So he's a very interesting guy, very talented. But you know, I don't know him very well, but
Okay.
we certainly you know, share the same part of the Star Wars universe. Although he was in all three of the original trilogy.
Yep.
And I think did he
He's
come?
the only character that survives all three movies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
and
right.
he came back in the
Yeah, was it Rogue
Rise of
Squadron?
Skywalker.
Right.
the-
Yeah, great guy. I knew Chris Malcolm a little better and Richard
Okay.
Oldfield. I really enjoyed the time I was with Lando Calrissian,
Ooh,
with
Billy
Billy Dee
Dee.
Williams, who was a wonderful man. He's got a tough agent that makes it very difficult to hang with him these days. But
Yeah, you had a great scene with him too, though.
yeah, no, he's a great guy, and one of my favorite memories of working on Empire was, you know, the day I was with Billy Dee while we're waiting to set up a shot, and we talked. You know, we had a wonderful conversation about grandmothers and hipness and you know, just life in general. Yeah, just a great guy.
Oh, good. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. So
The only guy I didn't meet was Alec Guinness. They weren't shooting any of his stuff when I was at Elstree.
how amazing would that have been, though? Like the legendary Alec Guinness
Yeah.
at the time.
Well, I worked with his son Matthew
Okay.
on another production called Oppenheimer, which was a BBC series with Sam Waterston as Oppenheimer, and Matthew Guinness played one of the scientists, and I was a scientist too, and he was a lovely guy
That's awesome.
and was very like his father.
I mean, was he just as Shakespearean as his father was?
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool.
If anybody wants to see Alec Guinness at his finest, on YouTube, there was a John le Carre series called Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Oh, the original, yes.
Yeah, the original one, not the movie that was made recently,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a BBC series that was in about 5 or 6 parts. You can get it on YouTube, and Guinness is just fabulous.
Yeah. Alec Guinness. Was he also King Lear? I know he was famous for another Shakespearean role that he did.
He could well have been.
Yeah, he may have been.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember him as King Lear specifically. But,
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which one. He was a major role in one of the Shakespearean plays,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to remember who it was. Anyways, because I'll go down that rabbit hole. So we're gonna get into a couple wrap up questions here, so that
Okay.
way I can get you back to your table here, but
Sure.
also just to kind of do a couple fun things to wrap
Yeah,
up here.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask you the hardest question you've ever been asked in your life. Are you ready for this?
Oh gosh.
All right, here you go, man. What is your favorite kind of taco?
I think any kind. I love Mexican food.
Mm-hmm.
I love bean and cheese burritos. You name it. Breakfast burrito in Ocean Beach, right outside of San Diego. I get 2, and I when I ever go out there and stay with my cousins. I want to go there every day. So I remember going and stay with. It's right as the other side of the ridge from Point Loma. 3 days in a row, we went to the taco stand and I had a breakfast burrito. So
That's how you know it's good. Is when,
Oh,
when you
yeah.
go 3 days in a row. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not getting tired of this. I
no,
like it.
no, my cousin was going crazy. He said, "You're nuts."
What advice would you give to somebody who's wanting to get into acting? What is some basic advice you would give them?
Well, it depends on whether you want to take a shot at stardom or the main business. If you really are ambitious for that kind of thing, you've got to go to Los Angeles, or maybe not now because things are changing, or New York or London. And if you go to London, you can get started in a drama school there, and then that would be a good foundation. On the other hand, if you're just wanting to do things like community theater or express yourself, you know, just do it. Get out there, and it doesn't matter where you are. You're going to find a theater company of some sort, either amateur or community or whatever. There's a lot of good regional theaters in America, in Minneapolis, Chicago, Louisville, Kentucky, Houston, Texas. Good regional companies where they do high quality work. Particularly, I'm thinking of the Actors Theater of Louisville, but there's also Steppenwolf in Chicago, and then there's the Tyrone Guthrie in Minneapolis.
A lot of people get their start at Tyrone Guthrie. There's a lot of
Yeah,
people who start off there.
Yeah, so find your way there. The regional theater companies are all affiliated with what's called the LORT, the League of Regional Theaters. If you go to New York and you go to one of the drama schools there, say NYU or what have you, LORT does the annually casting calls, auditions. So that's one way of doing it, and then going back out, you know, if you get picked by a regional company and you do rep there for a season or so. Acting is the kind of thing where the more you're in front of a stage and the more you rehearse with your fellow actors and actresses, you know, you build up your chops very quickly.
All right. Another hard question for you here. 1-to-1, no ships involved. Who wins in a fight, Dak Ralter or Wedge Antilles?
Dak Ralter.
Good answer. All right. What's next for you that fans should be excited about? Is there anything that you want to put out there and say, hey, check this out?
Well, I wrote a book on Duke Ellington, jazz, you know, composer and major beyond category cat.
Amazing composer.
Yeah. And concert he gave at the Newport Jazz Festival in 1956 is a book called Backstory in Blue. It was published in 2008, and in 2016, a New York producer approached me to put this into a film, which I did as a film script, and we went in two different directions. So really, since 2017, I've been sort of going up and down and moving. Getting close to a deal. Recently, I had in March, I was able to engage an A-list African-American actor to play Duke Ellington, and he's got a production company, and I was hopeful that this thing was going to go. We're still talking, but he's had to back away a little bit because he's got a bandwidth issue. So it's one of those things where, you know, if you have a property, a screenplay, you know, it's like a roller coaster. But that takes my creative juices. That's what I want to see happen before I fall off the perch. I don't really have any desire to get back into acting or playing music. I'm just too old, let's be honest. You know, I got other responsibilities, but this thing is, you know, I segued into writing. You know, I published 4 books, and the Backstory in Blue is one of them, which is the Ellington book. But in terms of the film business or streaming or whatever, that's really where I'm spending all my kind of risk time trying to move this thing along. I've got a few other people that I'm talking to, and I'm always kind of hustling this. You know, there it is. But you all know the guy that I was working with. He has got a presence in Star Wars, and he loved the project, but in the last couple of weeks he's backed away from it.
Oh.
But he didn't close the door entirely. If I can kind of pull something together my end, I can always go back to him. Great guy, though. If I can make it happen for him and for me, man, I'll be a happy camper.
Yeah. And finally, where can everybody follow you, support your work, or keep up with anything that you're doing? Any social media or anything like that?
Facebook, John Dak Morton. I can't remember the specific number, but if you look, you know, if you say Google Facebook, John Dak Morton. You'll get my my comings and goings in my page, and send me a friend request, and I'll bring you on board. I got about 3,600 followers, which is a nice number.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Not bad. It's not bad numbers. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you stop by and say hello to John Morton throughout the convention. Grab an autograph, take a photo, and celebrate one of the all-time great sci-fi legacies. One more huge round of applause for John Morton.